Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. This is Matt Gayer, Executive Director at Spur Local. We're talking about board fundraising today. We're going to give folks just another minute here to hop on, just one more minute, then we'll get started. Thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. For those of y'all who just joined, my name is Matt Gayer, Executive Director at Spur Local. We're talking about board fundraising today and how to create excitement around our board fundraising. A couple things to note before we begin. You should be able to see our slide right now, hear our audio. If you have issues with either of those today, just let us know. We'll try to address those as quickly as we can. If you have any questions throughout the day, feel free to put those in the question box. We'll answer those as they come up or at the end of the webinar today. And we will send out a copy of the slides and recording shortly afterwards. So we will receive a copy of the slides and recording shortly after the webinar today, along with a short evaluation, less than a minute to fill out. We really appreciate your feedback. So with that, we're going to go ahead and dive on into board fundraising. In just a second, I'll turn us to a new slide here and talk about the first of 5 tips we'll talk about today. But wanted to start with just a little context on board fundraising right now, because obviously our board to effectively fundraise first has to be effectively engaged. So what we're seeing right now, some trend and anecdotal information from talking to our 500 plus nonprofit partners, is that boards are more engaged than they were about a year ago, right? So it does seem like engagement is on the upswing compared to kind of the last 6 to 12 months. But we still see a lot of boards, like staff, having a lot on their plates, right? So really trying to think about how do we make things simple and easy for board members, straightforward for them to engage in some of our fundraising campaigns, especially if we're asking them to kind of ask their friends, networks, colleagues, etc., to give as well. We see board members still feel a sense of overwhelm right now when they think about their work life, personal life, and then their civic responsibilities like their board service with you. So we see a real need, which has always been true, but even more so as of late, to make things simple and kind of straightforward for boards in order to engage, especially when it comes to kind of fundraising. The other thing we see here is that board members are looking more and more, especially new board members, for meaningful engagement on that board. So making sure we're not just asking them for money and asking them to ask their friends for money, but also giving them opportunities to help with thank you letters, help with thank you calls, right? I know many of us have probably done that before, maybe had mixed results, but increasingly we're seeing new, younger board members looking for those opportunities to really engage with their time, not just their resources or their influence. So making sure we're doing that as well as some of the fundraising activities and tips we'll talk about today. So with that context of an engaged but distracted board at times, we'll dive on into some of the tips we're going to share. So the first, and this is, the other 4 tips I'll say kind of more directly relate to the actual act of board fundraising today. But the first is that at sometimes, if you look at your board, you've been trying to get them to do the fundraising better, engaging their networks better, and you've really tried a lot of different things that's not working. A lot of times, it's not necessarily that you're not trying the right things. There's that we might not have the right board members, right? Or we may not have onboarded those board members in a way that they expected to have to fundraise. And now it's hard to reset that expectation and reset that culture. Right. So this is something we see often. And if you do have a board right now that seems like it's been slow to adopt some of the fundraising tasks you've asked it, right? It doesn't really follow through on some of the stewardship pieces or the solicitation pieces. One thing that might be helpful there is bringing on some new folks, right? Bringing on some new board members, excuse me, that are excited for that, that know that's part of the responsibility and can hit the ground running, is going to bring some other board members along or help some other board members maybe feel like this isn't the right place for them right now, which might be the best outcome for both sides. So when we're recruiting board members with an eye towards them being effective and engaged fundraising and fundraising supporters in the future, what are we looking for? The first thing is thinking about bringing on board members that have specific skills and talents that are going to be useful for the board, useful for the organization, right? So this could be professional backgrounds, this could be more experience or perspectives that they have, either personally or professionally, or from other volunteer opportunities. But bring on folks, and why is this important that's going to make them a better fundraiser, is that means we're going to be tapping into that skill, that experience, that background, that identity that they have on a regular basis, and it's going to make them feel useful, right? We see board members that feel engaged, not surprisingly, engage more in the fundraising, right? They give more personally. They're also more likely to ask their networks to give as well. So a lot of times we want to make sure the first ask we're making of a board member is not just money, 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 right? But is actually like using the things we brought them on the board to do so they feel useful, they feel engaged, they feel part of the team, they have a responsibility to the organization. And that starts by recruiting the right folks that have those skills that we can tap into. So that's part of our recruitment. Secondly, right, when we're doing board recruitment, we're thinking about a diversity of perspectives and identities we can have on the board. And again, as we kind of have a board that's really inclusive, that has those diverse perspectives and identities, and can make those board members feel connected to each other, again, the more we see they give, right? As we've kind of worked with a lot of boards at organizations, as others have done research into this, as boards feel a sense of shared connection with each other, right? A sense of kind of connection with at least 2 or 3 other board members, they're more likely to give themselves, ask their friends, engage in fundraising activities because they feel a responsibility to the group, right? So the more we can think about who we're putting on the board and how we can connect them, the better fundraising is going to be. And then finally, as we bring on board members, we really want to think about the networks they represent, right? So this is going to be the most direct thing that has an impact on fundraising is that if I bring on 5 board members who already know each other, who all run in kind of the same circles, right? If I'm a legal services nonprofit, I bring on 5 lawyers that all work at kind of similar firms, know each other, have the same friends. When I ask them to do their kind of peer-to-peer piece, right? Go to their networks, try to get new supporters for us, there's going to be a lot of overlap there, right? And not a lot of at least professional diversity. So it's really important we're thinking about across our board, how can we tap into some folks that are going to have different social networks, different professional networks that are going to have a broader reach for the organization. So trying to diversify a little bit professionally, personally there, age-wise. So we have kind of a variety of networks we're able to tap into when we do some of those peer-to-peer campaigns. And then finally, just as a reminder, while all those things are important, time and time again, we see the common trait for really successful engaged board members is that they are passionate and interested in what the organization actually does, right? So would much rather have someone a little more junior in their career that really cares about the work, or someone that can give a little bit less that really cares about the work, than someone who's less engaged with that, right? Because especially over the 2-3 years of each term, and over the 2 or 3 terms they serve, that passion, that interest is what keeps that board member engaged. So that's the number one thing we should be looking for when we're doing board recruitment, with an eye towards how that's going to impact our fundraising. Secondly, and this is probably if there's one thing to take away from this, this is probably the most important tip we can offer today, which is about setting, or in some cases, resetting expectations with board members, right? The number one reason we see for miscommunication, disappointment, struggle, challenges, etc., between board and staff, or between board leadership and the rest of the board, is a differing of expectations, right? So staff think board signed up, totally understand that they're there to help generate resources for the organization. They're going to be giving personally. They're going to be reaching out to their networks. They're going to be helping with stewardship. They're going to be at events. And the board thinks they're there to just offer advice, right? Be a kind of sounding board, maybe get involved with some program management, right? Things that may or may not be true. So it's really important. We want to clarify those expectations both during the recruitment process, the onboarding process, and then on an ongoing basis. So it's really important we think about this during recruitment and onboarding, but also on an ongoing basis that we cement this in an annual commitment form. We see our partners about half these days have an annual commitment form. It definitely has increased in practice from just a few years ago, and is one of the top things we recommend for organizations to adopt. What this is, very simply, and we have a template for this, so if you want a template, just let us know. We have that in our online resource library that folks have access to. But it's really important we have this annual agreement that each board member individually completes each year, right? So it outlines the expectations for board members. It's usually like a one-page document, doesn't have to be very long. If you want, it can also have a second page that outlines your commitment to board members and the things you're going to do, like provide them timely information, etc. But on their commitments, it's going to include things like board meeting attendance. It's going to include things like being a good ambassador in the neighborhood. It's going to include things like, attending our annual event, right, possibly, or supporting fundraising stewardship efforts as time allows. So it's going to build in a lot of the expectations behavior, and then it's also going to build in any of the fundraising asks we want to have, right? So that stewardship example I just gave, if there's a give or get at the organization, an amount people have to give or get to be on the board, that's going to be included there. If there's any type of fundraising campaigns we do, like a Giving Tuesday peer-to-peer campaign, we're going to put that in there. And we want to make sure that board members see this, read through this, and are signing up for it each year. Why is this really important? We'll talk more about that give-get in a second. Why is this really important is it allows for accountability on both sides, right? If we don't put it in the form, uh, while we can hope the board will kind of jump at new opportunities that come up, we can't necessarily be upset, right, that they're not taking on more if we're from the staff side. On the board side, we're able to say, hey, you signed up, you signed this form, it says you're going to do a peer-to-peer campaign for Giving Tuesday, and you're going to invite at least 12 of your contacts to donate. That's the expectation, right? You wrote in this form, you're going to give the giver get. The giver gets $1,000. We're counting on that $1,000, right? So it allows you to really set that expectation and accountability, and it takes the conversation from a personal one of saying, like, I as board chair, I as the executive director, do not feel like you're kind of fulfilling your board duties, to saying, hey, you agreed to these things, these aren't getting done. Let's talk about why, right? Maybe something's going on personally, professionally, etc. And we can have some flexibility there, but it helps empower the board and also helps set those expectations. We see this as a really effective tool to help drive both fundraising and board engagement in general. Someone asked about the give or get and if that should be a certain number or what the average number is. Great question. So the average across the United States, if you were to kind of Google and look this up, is $5,000 for a give or get. That, though, includes a lot larger organizations as well. Anecdotally, when looking at our network of 500 small and medium-sized nonprofits, the typical give or get is $1,000. Some are obviously much more than that, some are much less, but 1,000 is the average that we see. And a good number of our organizations, still a minority, but a significant percentage of organizations now, no longer have a firm give or get amount, but ask people to make the gift one of their top 3 philanthropic gifts of the year. So what they're equalizing isn't the amount given, but the prioritization of the gift. The benefit of this is that you're not leaving money on the table. For instance, right, if you have board members that maybe could give 5 or 10K, but you need to keep your give get at 2K, so you have like diversity on the board, or you have some of your other board members that have been really effective. It also allows, again, for a little flexibility on who can serve on the board, a little greater diversity professionally and individually of who might be able to serve on the board. So that's something we've seen a lot of organizations adopt. Many organizations, for kind of budget certainty, for other reasons, right, have a firm number, and that's completely fine to do. But we do see more and more organizations with that kind of non-set number, a little more flexibility, and it is something that we recommend when it makes sense for an organization. Someone asked if we had an example of this commitment form. Yes, so we do have a template of this on our online resource library, and if you can't find it or have any questions about that, feel free to reach out. Happy to share with y'all. All right. So the next thing that's important to do with board members, especially with this kind of give get idea, is to help clarify what the give and get is, what each piece is there, and the expectations behind them. Right. So give obviously pretty straightforward. Financial resources given directly by the board member themselves. Right. And the goal is that all board members give something, even if they're getting this right from a company, from an institution, from kind of friends and family. We want all board members to donate something so we can report that 100% board giving, which is something a lot of foundations look for in terms of evaluating the health of your board and the engagement of your board. So that should be on the commitment form, that expectation that all board members give something during the year. Again, even if that's a small thing compared to the get that they're doing. What we want to help board members realize is even if they're fulfilling their give or get by writing that one check, right? We have $1,000 give or get, they write $1,000 check. Too often, board members then feel like their fundraising responsibilities are over, right? So we want to make sure in that board commitment form it's clear, even if there's not a monetary expectation on it in terms of how much, that board members throughout the year have a responsibility to tell other people in their networks about this work and to share this message with their colleagues, right? Friends, family, hopefully to bring in other donors and supporters, volunteers, etc. A lot of times, again, if we have that give or get, they just write a check for that give. There's no getting that's happening. And while they don't necessarily have to bring in a certain amount from that get, we want all of our board members sharing our message, right? The same as we want all of our board members giving something. So really trying to embed that and let folks know that. In terms of a get that counts towards a specific amount that a board member has committed to, we want to count gifts that are directly due to board member efforts. That could be individual, could be institutional. Um, Board member could make the intro but not make the ask. But we only want to count gifts here that are directly due to that relationship with that board member. And it's important, right? We're kind of drawing that line there so we know it's what the board is kind of adding to the organization. And then finally, we want to encourage board members to consider how they can support our fundraising efforts at large, right? If you're a board member on this call, I can guarantee you every development staff or executive director is going to be excited if you offer to help with stewardship and cultivation there. So that could be thank you calls, right? We've seen those have a lot of success. Thank you letters, right? Thank you notes. Especially on the stewardship side, donors respond typically very well to board members thanking them. And part of that is that they know board members are not kind of paid staff there, right? They expect the ED, the development director, to thank them for making a gift. But when that kind of volunteer leader as a board member does it, they know that board members choosing to do it, and it means something different to them and engages them in a different way. There's a respect and revere for board members, often from donors. So this will be a really powerful tool in kind of your donor stewardship thank you bucket in a way that while a board member may not be able to give as much as other board members, they can really make a real difference for the organization by engaging in this fundraising support. Obviously, the other thing we see here is helping get people to events, right? So you may not be reaching out to your network to ask them for money as a board member, but you could be reaching out to that network to ask them to attend something, right? To go to an event and be a part of it. So how do we help the board be successful at this, right? What makes sense here? The big thing is that we want to make sure we're supporting board members to feel comfortable and confident in making these fundraising asks. A lot of times we assume, especially if we have a board that's full of business professionals, seasoned in their career, successful in their career, that they're going to be excited and fine, right, to go out and ask for money. And a lot of times they're not. A lot of times in that work, right, they're not asking for money, right? That's not how their kind of for-profit business operates or how their career has gone. And people feel uncomfortable doing it, especially asking kind of friends, family, colleagues in terms of that kind of get part of the give or get. So I want to make sure they feel comfortable, confident about that, and that's going to make them more likely to do it, right? We don't see often a board member not fundraising simply because they don't want to, right? It's usually they don't feel confident in it, they don't feel comfortable in it, they don't know what to do about it, or they didn't kind of plan for it, right? The expectation piece we already talked about. So what do we want to do in terms of training them? The first piece is really helping them understand their pitch, right? Which is a combination of these first two columns here about why they care and details of the work. So I want to help them know on the details part, they do not have to be an expert about our day-to-day operations, right? They need to know broadly the mission vision, which we can give them that language, practice sharing it in their own words, right? And then be able to briefly describe 2 sentences tops, 3 sentences tops, our programming and kind of why we do the work we do, and then give them a story or a stat to be able to share, right? And let them know, we can give this all to you in writing. You can have this right to use in either your verbal appeals, your emails, your texts, etc. But make it simple for them. The other part of that, and what we want to push our board members to do, is not just to share that. If they're just sharing that, it's only going to be moderately effective when they're reaching out to their networks. They need to add that personal reason for why they care about this work, right? Why did they sign up for this board? Why do they stay on this board? Why are they asking for their friends, family, colleagues to donate to this organization? This can be a great thing to have them practice during a board meeting with a fellow board member. This serves two purposes. One, board members hear from each other why they're passionate about the work, which can help engage them. And two, it helps those individuals feel more confident in talking about that personal reason, right? What their connection with the work is. As they practice that, we've seen some organizations as kind of a example here of what this looks like in real life. Do this during a board meeting and make it some type of friendly competition, right? Kind of a pitch off, right? To gamify the activity where board members can do this with a fellow board member, practice this, and then do it in front of the whole board. There's some voting, right? Someone wins, maybe it's a little trophy or gift card, right? Or something fun like that. But we've seen some boards, depending on their culture, have a lot of success with that. Even if we don't gamify it to that level, the role playing part with each other can be really helpful here. And then finally, for any of these appeals as well, especially if we're asking them to do it as part of a set campaign, right? End of year, Giving Tuesday, anniversary campaign, etc. Give them some sample language, right? As I said at the beginning, we see board members want to engage but be easily overwhelmed right now. So as we can make it easier for them, better. So giving them some sample language, right? For emails, for social media posts, some things to talk about. And if possible, we do see one recommendation from a couple different organizations that have done this, is give them 2 versions, right? Maybe a long and short version, maybe a formal, informal, maybe about this program or that program, whatever it might be, whatever makes sense for you. Give them 2 different versions and let them choose between it. As board members have more choice on those templates, they actually feel more ownership and they're more likely to use it, right? So if I just say, here's the template, then they feel like they just have to use it. We actually see that adoption rate is a little lower than if we say, hey, here's 2 things, right? And then they feel like they can pick one that's more in their voice, more in their interest. They feel more ownership, they're more likely to do it. And then finally, our last tip where we pause for any questions folks have before we wrap up today is making sure we set some goals around this, right? If I just tell my board, I want you to fundraise, right? Or if we just kind of set the individual commitment forms, we never talk about it collectively, we're not going to drive that culture of accountability we need to make sure this fundraising and these fundraising related tasks happen. So what goals should we be setting here? We should set a goal for board participation in fundraising. So ideally, that's 100% of board members are giving something personally to the organization, even if only a small gift. We should set an overall goal for board fundraising. This is probably already a budget line item for us. If it's not a line item in our budget, though, want to set that overall goal. This could either be just number of board members times the get amount. This could be higher than that, right? Because we want some board members to go above and beyond that. It could be that we add up those individual amounts from the commitment forms if we don't have a formal give or get, and that's our total here. But whatever it is, setting a goal that says the board collective is going to raise 20K, 40K, 50K this year. We also have seen some organizations go a little deeper than that and talk about the average individual increase. So while we keep individual giving private to the individual board member, looking at last year and this year and saying we want everyone to give 5% more or get 5% more this year than they did the year before. But at least the participation goal and the overall goal, some of those additional goals might be helpful if your board's a little farther along in both data and fundraising. In addition to the money, we want to ask the board, right, to set some goals around thank you letters or donor meetings, invites they're sending to people, right? So maybe for our big gala in the fall, we want the board collectively to send 120 invites to people, right? Or across the year, we want the board to help us send out 50 thank you letters or make 25 thank you calls, whatever that might be. But thinking about, can we prioritize and set goals around some of the board actions in addition to kind of the board kind of give or get. And then finally, want to check in with the board on this at least every 6 months. So at least twice a year, seeing where we're at on this. One tip for how to do this is to create an anonymized scorecard that we can show at the board meeting that has kind of total giving, percentage of board members that have given, and then percentage of board members that have hit their commitment, whether that's an individual commitment or a give or get that we all have to hit. That can be really helpful for the board to see that. Individuals know, right, if they've done that or not, so that can kind of spur them to take more action. And collectively, lets the board know how they're doing and how they should feel about their performance. We want to make sure if we set these goals that we are doing that evaluation piece. We're not just kind of checking in on this once a year, because then they're not going to be referenced enough to really be important. And secondly, we want to include something about the participation, not just the dollars, so the board really feels like it's their engagement we're after, not just their money. Finally, these are a couple kind of quick next steps to kind of get you started in some of this board fundraising, but we're going to pause here for any questions that folks have. Someone asked if we haven't had the board successfully do much getting before, what's a good first step? That's a great question. I think the big thing we see there is putting it as either part of kind of a peer-to-peer campaign, right? So they feel like they're getting as part of an overall effort of the organization, or really specifically kind of challenging the board, saying, hey, we really want every board member to get, 3 people to donate X, Y, or Z, right? Or we really want the board before the end of the fiscal year to invite 5 people to donate, right? None of them may donate, but we're focusing on the invite part, right, more than the actual results there. So either setting a modest goal like that or putting them as part of a peer-to-peer campaign. Those are 2 great ways to kind of get board members started, especially if they haven't been kind of comfortable with doing that in the past. Any other questions folks have before we wrap up today? All right, great. Well, we'll send out the slides and recording shortly afterwards, and thank you all for joining. Have a good rest of your day.